Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong has stressed the vital role the U.S. has in maintaining peace and prosperity in Southeast Asia. He spoke at the ASEAN-US Summit in Kuala Lumpur, saying continued actions and leadership from America have enabled the region to thrive. And Mr. Wong says ASEAN looks forward to strengthening that partnership. CNA's Aslam Shah joins us live from the Malaysian capital. Aslam, thank you for joining us. And why is the U.S. so crucial to the region, according to Prime Minister Wong?
During the US-ASEAN summit here at KLCC, Prime Minister Wong talked about how in the past, for the region in times where the tensions were high and also the region was fractured, it was US leadership that helped to secure the peace and stability in the region. Now, he hailed the recent efforts by the US President Donald Trump, who helped with the peace efforts between Thailand and Cambodia and also in the Middle East leading up to this summit. But this relationship is not a one-way street. Now, Prime Minister Wong highlights that further collaboration between US and ASEAN is mutually beneficial for the US as well. Now, let's not forget, this summit comes at a time where many ASEAN goods have been imposed US tariffs, and ASEAN economies being very interconnected with one another are affected directly or indirectly. So the messaging from Prime Minister Wong is really to encourage trade with the US, because this region is a growing economy with about 700 million people, and also ASEAN countries buy goods from almost all US states, from corn to Boeing planes, as he highlighted in his speech. So this is something that Prime Minister Wong encourages, and also in future areas of development as well in the digital economy and also in energy, which the ASEAN region is focusing on. And if anything were to happen in the coming years, Singapore will play a very key role, because Singapore will be ASEAN chair in 2027, and also the year that marks 50 years of ties between US and ASEAN.
Aslam, what else was on PM Wong's schedule today?
Yes, Kok Ing, in fact, it has been a busy day since the morning, and in fact, right now, as we speak, Prime Minister Wong is also having meetings. Now, just down this corridor, right at the end, is where all the rooms are, where the meeting rooms where all the meetings happen in various meetings rooms, and Prime Minister Wong was in and out of various meetings, including ASEAN meetings and also bilateral meetings where he had with Brazil and also South Africa. And Singapore has always been seen as a steady diplomatic voice for the ASEAN region. So there were plenty of ASEAN-related meetings where Prime Minister Wong delivered speeches. Now, that's including meetings for ASEAN with India and also Japan and also with the European Council. Now, the European Union Council. Now, these meetings, the messaging from Prime Minister Wong is quite consistent, and it's in the interest of both Singapore and also the ASEAN region, which is to maintain peace and stability and to ensure that there is collaboration and cooperation for further economic growth moving forward.
Well, many thanks for that update. CNA's Aslam Shah reporting live from the ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur. And to help unpack the events at the ASEAN Summit, we have in the studio Simon Tay. He's Associate Professor and Chairman at the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. Prof. Tay, thank you for joining us. Now, President Trump at the summit today, as Thailand and Cambodia signed the peace deal.
Yes.
What does his presence say about America's push to reassert influence in Southeast Asia as China's involvement becomes larger?
I think ASEAN has a great convening power. It's not just Trump who's there. China is there, and so is India, even Brazil. So, and Japan's new Prime Minister. But Trump's appearance is important. Trump didn't always pay attention to ASEAN in his first term, and even his successor, Joe Biden, missed a couple of summits. And for Malaysia, the host, he's really only the third sitting American president to be in Kuala Lumpur. Before him was Obama 10 years ago, and before that, you have to go back to the 60s for Lyndon Johnson. So America still remains a huge power economically. For the trade issues he's pushed on since Liberation Day, for security and his chance to try to push for peace. And I think in that sense, it's not just the South American tensions, but a number of issues where America remains the essential power.
So how crucial do you think was Mr. Trump in getting this peace deal across the line? Because ASEAN has this reputation of being slow and indecisive. Or does it risk turning this regional peace settlement into something of a US-China rivalry?
Well, I think the key part is to understand that Trump has no magic wand. There are many issues, whether it's the Thai-Cambodia border, a long, complex issue, or what's happening inside Myanmar or South China Sea, where you can't just wave a wand, turn up for 24 hours and solve a deep-lying problem. And sometimes when the appearance of the American president posters is there, it tends to attract attention to him rather than the hard daily work that's done by the countries involved, by ASEAN as a group. And ASEAN's got to pick up and push on after this. So Thai-Cambodia border, critically, when he threatened both sides, they came to the table. It's a good step. But as you saw the Thais say, this is not a peace accord. This is just simply a start. Removing the fighting, returning some hostages. Thousands of people remain unsettled and in very makeshift tents. And there's a long history underlying this. And who's going to carry that can going forward? America will be gone. Well, not America, hopefully, but Trump will become somewhere else very shortly.
Now, as you pointed out, the dispute goes way back to colonial era borders. So what needs to be done to actually make sure the peace accord holds and move it forward?
Well, besides the historical part, which is real, there has been, since the fighting in this year, a really bad blood among the citizens of each side. Nationalism, but in a bad way, directed at each other. And more than that, there's been some animosity, business interests said to be at the heart of this, including scam centers. So this is why I mean there are a lot of different causes, and the American president's presence is critical, but it's not going to be sufficient to really build a longer-term peace. Even the border, right? I mean, this clash on this part of the border is a thousands of mile border. There are going to be chances of a regression. And then who are we going to turn to? And I think that's where Prime Minister Anwar and ASEAN have done a very good role, a bit in the background, but something that has to be understood. The group helps hold people together, bring them to the same room. And that's why I'm glad to see Prime Minister Anwar, on behalf of ASEAN, next to the two prime ministers and Donald Trump, as they sign this agreement.
You mentioned Myanmar crisis. Could this Thailand-Cambodia peace accord sort of serve as a model for U.S. diplomacy in other flashpoints like Myanmar and the South China Sea even?
Well, I think on Myanmar, you've got to see whether it's on Trump's agenda. I mean, we know while he's in the region, I haven't heard him say much. And when he's traveling in Middle East and Europe, he's got many other issues on his table. I would say also that having been in Myanmar a lot, there are some very deep domestic issues. Sometimes for peace, actual peace, there has to be a willingness of each side to compromise. And I think until that's there, I think it can't be pushed. And so ASEAN is the patient one. ASEAN owns that problem and struggling with it, but it's going to manfully struggle with it and keep going persistently at it.
Now, a lot is happening at this summit, but a long-running issue has sort of taken a backseat. That's the South China Sea's Code of Conduct, which ASEAN is trying to nail down with China. Can you tell us why it's so difficult to move this forward?
Well, among the ASEAN people, there are 4 claimants. And sometimes there's confusion as to whether the Code of Conduct is meant to settle the claims. It's not. So it's just meant to settle some of what you do when you meet each other, not to further exacerbate the problem. I would say that China should and ASEAN should progress this. Because, again, this is where the American presence can be useful. It can be a signal that if you guys can't come to a decision, can't come to some form of dialogue and process to keep peace, America might try to impose. It might be more nervous of doing so with other Cambodia and Thailand because China is significant. And the China-US issues for Donald Trump will be much more important than the South China Sea with ASEAN.
Now, you mentioned China's involvement here. So the U.S. is also holding trade talks with China on the sidelines. How do you think America's push for peace in this region ties in with its efforts to balance China militarily and economically?
Well, I think that the chance of a deal between the two on fairly good terms, I think would be the ingredients for a lasting peace. Nobody in ASEAN really wants to be on America's side or China's side. Rather, like Malaysian Prime Minister said, they want to do business with both. And that depends on whether the two big giants can themselves find some way of living together. But on the actual deal, I think it's quite interesting. We have seen the reinforcement of various trade deals with the ASEAN countries bilaterally, 19%, 20%. But we don't know the big moving part. What is China's number? If it's in that region, I don't think the ASEAN countries are going to feel particularly happy. In fact, jokingly, when Donald Trump said he's 100% behind America, behind ASEAN, some people said 100% tariffs? That would be a dangerous thing.
Now, Mr. Trump's tariffs have really seriously reshaped global trade. And ASEAN is trying to adapt and trying to promote intra-ASEAN trade to sort of cushion the blow. Can you tell us what are the major roadblocks to building up, boosting intra-ASEAN trade?
No, I think that's a great question because so much times when the American president comes, everyone thinks it all depends on him. ASEAN's trade with America is not unimportant, but it's not the bulk of things. The intra-ASEAN trade, that number needs to go up, depends on us clearing the way. A lot of them are non-tariff measures. Some of it is for real. I mean, some safety issues, health issues, but sometimes it's just disguised protectionism, putting barriers, bureaucracy to sort of stifle trade. And I think that's where ASEAN's got to do its own homework. It doesn't depend on America. America can't block it. And then there are the other partners. I'm glad to see Japan's new Prime Minister there. Japan is a major partner. China is too. And working within ASEAN and with RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, I think there's a lot of chance to progress trade within our region and with Trump separately.
Now, the big finale for Mr. Trump's visit to Asia is his much anticipated meeting with President Xi Jinping. And there's a lot to unpick here. There's the trade tariffs, there's the export controls on rare earths and chips. If there's a deal, what elements would you be looking out for, which are most important to each side? And if there's a partial deal even, does it signal a move towards more managed competition?
Well, I think that's where Trump's paving the way, even this summit meeting. He struck a number of rare earth deals with Malaysia and others. And I think this is preparing the way that if something breaks down with China, and it will be possible, that things cannot be achieved to the degree they want. Why? Well, Trump has got to decide how much he's willing to do a sort of deal with China, rather than to sometimes see China as a persistent competitor and a rival. And I think that rhetoric has been mixed along the way. And I think the sort of the practical side of Trump, the deal-making side of Trump, is the one that has to be relied upon to strike an opportunity with China.
Well, many thanks for your insights. We've been speaking to Associate Professor Simon Tay from the Singapore Institute of International Affairs.
Thank you.